All right, so now let's look at the Al-Fatah warhead. Well, the Al-Fatah warhead hits the ground at speeds in excess of 4 kilometers per second. Let's just go to slide 11. There you go. Thank you. If you look at the leftmost curve, uh, the 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 x-axis, the horizontal axis is velocity in kilometers per second. The y-axis is the altitude. So let's look at the blue curve. If we look at the top of the blue curve, it's at an altitude of 200 kilometers. It's traveling about 3.5 kilometers per second. And as it re-enters the atmosphere, it continues to increase its speed down to about 20 kilometers altitude. And then at 20 kilometers altitude, it starts slowing up very dramatically. That's because the density of air is exponentially increasing as you get to low altitude. And the air drag is high enough that it's significantly slowing up the warhead. But this warhead has very low drag. It's got what's called a very high ballistic coefficient. So it still hits the ground at over 3 kilometers per second. 3 kilometers per second, keep in mind, is its equivalent weight in TNT just from the kinetic energy of impact. So this thing could hit the ground at 3.4 kilometers per second, which already is going to make it higher, more explosive per unit weight than TNT in terms of its kinetic energy. But if we look at the green curve immediately to the right, we see it's accelerating at a higher rate. Now, the reason it's accelerating at a higher rate is because the rocket motor is on in this calculation. So I have the rocket motor on, and the drag is lower because the rocket motor reduces what's called the base drag. We have this rocket, and as the air flows around the rocket, there's a base, and there's low pressure at the base, and that tends to drag, cause a greater slowing up of the warhead. But when there's a rocket exhaust coming out, you don't have that base drag, so the base drag is eliminated. So it doesn't slow up as fast because the base drag is gone, and also because it's got thrust. So this is a very rough estimate. It's not exact, but it's good enough for our purposes. And you can see that when this thing hits the ground, it's over 4 kilometers per second in velocity. So if you take 4 over 3 and you square it, because the kinetic energy goes as the square of the velocity, you're getting close to about 2.5 times the kinetic energy of its equivalent weight in TNT. So if this thing were only a 1,000 kilogram object with no explosive warhead, it would have the explosive capacity, it would have the explosive effect of 2,500 kilograms of explosives. Well, that's like a 5,000 pound warhead. That's big explosive effect. So now, if we include that there's 500 kilograms of explosive material, that makes the explosive energy even higher. And in fact, the chemical explosive makes the kinetic explosion more violent, because as you come into the ground with a solid object, all of a sudden it detonates, because that's the chemical warhead. So now you have a fireball of expanding kinetic material, which is moving at 4 kilometers per second right above the ground. So this thing splashes into the ground and gets superheated by its own kinetic energy. So this thing becomes even a more powerful explosion. And so it's got the power of a 2,500 kilogram explosion. So this is enormously devastating. So let's just go to slide 5 for a second. This is an actual inertial navigation system that's used inside or something like it is used inside the warhead. You see how small it is. It weighs next to nothing. It's got what's called microelectronic mechanical system sensors. They're called MEMS. This is what keeps a drone. The drones have these units. They're digital electronic systems, and some of the digital electronics are microelectronic sensors that can tell what the accelerations are when the drone is, and its orientation in space, gyroscopic. So you have these tiny circuits. They weigh grams, and they're quite accurate. And you only have to be accurate for 10 or 20 seconds from the time you're above the atmosphere where you know where you are to the time you hit the ground. So the inertial navigation system, as the fins and the rocket motor allow me to change the orientation of my vehicle so I can maneuver, this inertial navigation system says, oh, that's about right. Don't do any more, just make this angle of attack. So the only contribution to miss error that's significant is my ability to control exactly the orientation of my missile. And, it's hard, there's no way to know without testing, but a reasonable guess, based on experience with hypersonic control systems, is that it's maybe, you maybe have an error, a miss error of 10 to 20 meters at the target. So there's almost no contributing error from your navigation system or from your location knowledge. All right, so it's almost all from control errors. Well, 10 meters precision, when you have a warhead that's going to produce 5,000 pounds of explosive effect, is nothing. So if we go to slide 9, sorry to keep jumping around on you like this, we have a curve showing you the blast range of this missile, of this warhead, assuming, let's look at the red curve. At the bottom is the distance in feet. I'm sorry, I always have to choose whether it's feet or meters, depending on my audience. But we see at a range of 110 feet. The horizontal axis is feet. The vertical axis is the blast pressure. And if we look at the red curve and we look at the 40 pounds per square inch marker, we see at about 110 feet, 30 meters or so, we have 40 pounds per square inch of blast. Well, the reason that's interesting to know is 40 pounds per square inch is so intense that it will shatter a concrete and reinforced concrete and steel building wall. So it'll knock down a building that's concrete and steel reinforced structure. That, like a skyscraper, over the area that gets subjected to this 40 pounds per. I'll show you a picture of a building that's been subjected to that level of overpressure. In fact, let's jump to slide 16. Sorry to keep jumping around like this, but it's you seem to, all right. This is the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, which was attacked in a terrorist bombing attack. If you look on the ground, there's kind of a whitish area underneath the building. There was a bomb on the ground. Maybe it was 20,000 pounds, or maybe it was in the 10,000 kilogram pound, but it was not. It didn't penetrate into the building, like I'll show you what could happen. But that's what happened to the building. This is a very, very, very well constructed building made out of concrete and steel. And if you go to slide 17, you can get a close up of the kind of damage that this blast overpressure did to the building. And if we go to slide 18, we can see these red little pyramids show you where people were killed. So the blast wave propagated through this structure. Now imagine that we have a 5,000-pound warhead coming through the center of the structure. Okay, not through, not outside the structure, but coming through the central roof of the structure and exploding in the structure. So the structural walls are not being collapsed from the outside in. They're being collapsed from the inside out. They're being blown out. And of course, they're contained. So the level of shock is going to be considerably higher by factors of 2 or 3 inside the structure itself. So if we look at the range at which the blast can occur, let's go to slide 13. So here is a satellite photo of Washington, D.C. The building with the bluish, the large building with the bluish roof, or the greenish roof, is the Library of Congress building. So anybody who's been in Washington has probably seen this in there. The building immediately to the left is the Capitol, rather giant monumental building. What I've shown here is there's a block immediately adjacent to the Library of Congress, which has normal kinds of buildings, very well constructed buildings, large buildings, but not monumentally structured. The inner yellow circle is the 40-pound per square inch range curve for this particular warhead if it hit in a location at the center of that circle. So in other words, for the Al-Fatah warhead. 40 pounds per square inch would level all those buildings. They'd just be flattened. Now imagine that's Tel Aviv. Okay, so this is, now the next curve out, 10 pounds per square inch, shows you buildings that are going to be so heavily damaged, they're going to look in the interior like the interior of that federal building I showed you, because the buildings are not so well constructed. The walls cave in, but the whole building may or may not collapse, but everything inside the building is destroyed, along with people being killed in the buildings from the shockwave propagating through the structure. So that's the 10-pound per square inch contour. The 5-pound per square inch contour is where any building that's just a simple brick building or a simple wood frame building gets knocked down. So out to this 5-pound per square inch contour, you're basically talking about a near flattened terrain, almost everything. And at 2 pounds per square inch at the outer curve, you're talking about the outside interior, the rooms and apartments that are in the outside facing the blast area being very heavily damaged. Windows blown in, inner, immediate inside non-supporting walls blown in. So very, very severe damage. So you're talking about what in World War II would have been called a blockbuster. There were bombs, very big bombs that they were dropping, and they would destroy a whole block of buildings. That's what a blockbuster is. So what the Al-Fatah is a blockbuster. So let's go to slide 14 now. All right, this is a notional, here are, I've just assumed 3 of these Al-Fatah warheads hit. Now, keep in mind that the accuracy of this missile is maybe 20 meters or 30 meters. And that is the size of the 40 psi contour. So if you look at the 40 psi, it could be moved 20 or 30 meters and up or down or right or left, because the accuracy, that's the accuracy limit because of control problems with the warhead. But it shows you that if they want to target these areas, they can hit them. And, that means if they targeted, if these were targeted buildings in Tel Aviv, this is the kind of level they could do. So the building on the left, the monumental building constructed out of concrete and steel, would look like the interior of the federal building in Oklahoma City looked like. And not everybody, but most people in the building would be killed, or certainly everybody would be severely injured. Nobody would escape severe injury, and almost everybody in that building would be killed. You'd collapse the whole interior part of the building, and parts of the building would be standing, but parts of the building would be standing like the parts of the building you could see in this Murrah building. Let's go to slide 15, just to see it. So you can see, here's a picture of the building. So you can see that the interior of the building, even though there were areas that were not knocked down, if you look at the left most section, where you can literally see light through the building, the areas that are standing, you can see how intense the blast wave was. It just knocked out both non-supporting and supporting walls. So that's what the interior of the Library of Congress would look like, away from the area that was collapsed, which is what you're seeing in the area that's collapsed. That's very, very severe damage. And if you want to see what one of these warheads looked like when they were arriving, let's just jump to slide 6. So this is one of these Al-Fatah warheads arriving in Tel Aviv. In this particular date, we actually know the date. Of course, there was no damage shown by the Israelis, but let me tell you, there was a lot of damage done by this. If you look at the actual incoming object, you can see a long tail, which has at the beginning of it a very bright, fat region of extreme brightness. That is the exhaust from the rocket motor. At the tip of that, not visible, is the warhead itself. So at the tip of this, you have a warhead coming in. It's carrying 500 kilograms of explosive, and it has 1,000 kilograms of weight, which translates into 2,000 or 2,500 kilograms of explosive kinetic energy. So we're talking about 2,500 kilograms of explosive effect. If you look at the next slide, we see this is not a small explosion, as you can see. Or you're seeing the light. You're not seeing the explosion. You're seeing the light scattered from the sky. What happens, you have an explosion. It's so hot. In this case, it's probably around close to 6,000 degrees. The interior of the explosion is probably close to the temperature at the surface of the sun, just because so much kinetic energy is collected in a small space. It lasts only for a very short interval of time, because all of this very hot material then expands outward and produces a shock wave. And if we look at the next slide, we can see the actual shock wave. This is much longer. So this, you can be sure that there was tremendous damage on the ground. That that was just simply not shown to the world because of Israeli concealing the damage. And that's why in one of the conversations between Donald Trump and Netanyahu, Netanyahu complained to Trump. He actually said, this is on record, he said, we're not as worried about the nuclear capabilities of Iran as we are about the missiles. You got to stop the missiles first. Well, this tells you the story. This is why he's saying this. If you're facing hundreds of Al-Fatah missiles landing on Tel Aviv and Haifa and Beersheba and other consequential cities in a small country that only has a few significant cities, it's only 9 million people, you're talking about the potential complete economic destruction of the country. You won't kill everybody, that's correct, but you will destroy Israel's capacity to have an economy, and that's as good as destroying it. You will eliminate, unless the United States keeps giving them $3 or $4 billion a year like the United States has been doing. And that's going to be very hard to do because the American public is now totally fed up with the Israelis. You look at polls of the American attitudes toward the Israelis, and the American public is absolutely outraged by the murderous behavior of Israel, and it's not supported by the average American. And it's going to be very difficult for follow-on American governments to continue providing Israel these outlandish levels of military support if the American people are so hostile toward that. And we're seeing this in the polls leading up to the congressional election. All of a sudden, all of these Democrats who stand up and applaud this interloper I'm speaking now as an American citizen, I'll just express my outrage. This crook who comes in and addresses our Congress, Netanyahu, these my representatives, people I voted for, standing up and applauding this war criminal because he's giving them money through these American specialized political action committees. You don't see them doing it so fast now. And I hope all these guys get kicked out of office. Unfortunately, I don't think it'll happen, but they're all of a sudden not speaking so strongly about how they're going to, Israel. I'm worried about the United States. I don't want my country involved in wars that are involved in massacring innocent people, nor do I want it supporting a state that's involved in massacring innocent people, nor do I want that state dictating our military policies that are not in the security interest of my country. So I'm fed up with the Israelis, and I'm not alone. And we're going to see what's going to happen in the future. But my guess is it's going to be these political action committees are going to have a much harder time doing their magic with the American government. They're going to be there because they have lots of money and they're not going to go down without a fight. But I think the free ride in Israel is over. And what ultimately happens, I don't know. But I think the Israelis are going to face some extreme reaction from the American public in the form of voting. And if it doesn't express itself adequately in this congressional election, let me assure you it's going to express itself in the presidential election that follows. And any Israeli, or I may have many American friends who are very troubled. I won't call them supporters of Israel because these are friends who they're not as outspoken as I am. And they're troubled because they support the existence of Israel for historical reasons, but they know what's happening. And I can tell you from my many conversations with these friends, they are not happy with Israel. And the reason they're not happy with Israel is not because of Israel, it's because of Netanyahu and what Israel is doing. And you give these people a couple of more years, they're also going to be out there saying, no, this is too much. So I think the writing is on the wall, and the longer people, Americans, I'm now speaking to my American colleagues, the longer my American colleagues who continue to want to support Israel for historical reasons want to see that country supported, the longer this guy Netanyahu in Israel is allowed to go on with this genocidal behavior, this fascist behavior, um, the longer, the more the prospects for Israel's future diminishes. So I think if you're a supporter of Israel, you should do everything in your power to get this guy under control, and get that country back on track with regard to stopping these brutalities that are inexcusable. So I think there's a political dimension to this, and there is a practical dimension to this, because the Iranians can do the damage that they may choose to do. And I can't blame the Iranians for doing this. This portrayal of the Iranians as this monstrous group of people that some of these imbecilic members of Congress. I mean, it's hard to believe that these guys can get up with a straight face and yell at the Iranians that somehow they're all criminals. When you look at what the West, in the United States in particular, has done to and tried to do to Iran. And I'm not a supporter of the Iranian government, but I am sympathetic to the Iranian people. And no people deserve what has happened to these to them at the hands of the West over the time from Sadat Khan. And the Iranians are going to correct the situation because we have lost the war, we Americans, and the amount of damage done to Israel and other places is going to be determined by us, not Iran, because Iran is going to do what it has to do. Iran is facing an existential threat, and they have made it clear what they will do. If you strike me, I will strike you in a similar way, and maybe in a multiplicative way, because the situation for us is dire. You're threatening our existence. And, how can I blame people for doing that? I mean, perfectly rational. And they have executed their military strategy in an open way, and they have executed it with restraint, frankly. I think they have shown an incredible amount of their anger has been focused in making extremely competent military decisions, and they have not let things get out of hand. I hope they will not decide to build a nuclear weapon. I think they are in a strong position by just simply keeping the position they're in, because I think they will weaken their own security situation. They have the option to build a nuclear weapon if need be. I hope they won't be put in a position where they need to do it. That would require a nuclear attack on Iran by Israel. And so if the Israelis do not attack Iran with nuclear weapons, then the best strategy for Iran is to maintain its current nuclear posture, and with whatever else it wants to do. So that if I were advising the government in Iran, I would say your conventional strategy is excellent. It's well done. Don't let revenge blind you. Just do what you're doing. Be predictable in the sense that you do this to me, I'm going to do that to you. So you deter your adversary by making it clear to them it's in no way beneficial to them to do anything. You want to destroy one of my water desalination plants, because you're an idiot and it's a war crime to attack that desalination plant. Well, we have a lot of water from mountains and things. Desalination is a great benefit to us, but it's not critical to our survival. But let me tell you, all your Gulf state all those Gulf states that you have military bases in, you Americans, they don't exist if we destroy those desalination plants. They don't have sources of water like we have. So why are you pushing us to do this? Because we will do it. You continue along this path, we will do it. And you should make that clear, and Iran has done this. And I think that's the right strategy. Don't do it first, but make it clear that you will do it. And if the Americans provoke you sufficiently, then you have to respond. And with the nuclear, you should continue to show the kind of posture you've done. That would be my recommendation if I were talking to Iranian political leadership. Don't let your anger take over.